Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Real Table Talk. It's Sunday, it's 5 o'clock, and here we are, Real Table Talk. And it's nice to see you all, or see you? It's nice to be here with you all. So my name is Leslie O'Connor, and I started Real Table Talk, wow, a few months now. And the reason why I started this was because I wanted to serve you. I want you to talk about relevant topics which we all should be talking about, or we all need to talk about, and find out different answers for those questions you might have. So our subject today is mental health. And a couple of weeks ago, we had Dr Delroy Hall on our platform, and he is back with us today. So if you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. So that's enough from me. So I can't do this all by myself. I have got two beautiful women. Ladies, please introduce yourselves.
Go on, Marcy, you're the eldest.
Speak to you later, Karen. Yeah, I'm Marcia Hilton, and I am the Director of Life Inspired Wellness, which is an organisation that supports women who are escaping from narcissistic abuse, and I help them create healthy new relationships.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm Karen Cruz, and I'm the Director of Flourished Minds. So we're a life coaching company, and we work specifically mainly with young people, helping them to realise their self-worth, their potential, help them with their confidence, managing self-esteem, anxiety, all that good stuff. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, ladies. And Dr. Delroy Hall, please introduce yourself to our audience today.
Yes, I'm Delroy Hall, living in Sheffield, honorary Yorkshireman, been here for 25 years now. Yes, I'm a counsellor, have been for 30 years, also a teacher, trainer. And yeah, the whole thing about mental health for me is not an interest, it's a concern. And it's very different. I'm not interested in it. I'm concerned by mental health. I meant for people generally, but certainly for Black people specifically.
Excellent, thank you for that. And the reason why Delroy's back with us, did I just say this, is because you had lots of questions what you wanted to ask us, and the time when Delroy was on the platform before, it went so quickly, so please leave your comments. Karen, are we okay with the comments, the notifications and everything today? Because I know last week we had a few technical problems.
Well, I have had a notification and we've had one like so far. We've got 2 people watching already, so I'm assuming everything's going to go well. So if I'm struggling, I'll let you know.
Excellent, thank you. Welcome everybody. So let's get started. So Delroy, my question to you, mental health, how can we get our men talking? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, it's a huge one. Well, 2 things. I think when men are men, it's kind of getting groups of men together. I know in Sheffield, for example, every Friday night, so I'm blind at the moment, but every Friday night, up to 20 odd Black men would meet in a barber's. Once the barber was closed, they would talk, and nothing was off limits. It's interesting, I remember being in the barbers and hearing some of the young guys talking about prostate cancer and tests. 10 years ago, that wasn't happening. So there's certainly a shift. So I think there's 2 things about men getting together as men and talking in groups on a regular occasion. The other thing is that we have to change how we parent our boys. And it starts from a young age. So what we now know, as adults, if we're upset and our children see us crying, if we let them know why we're upset, that lets them know it's okay to talk about unpleasant emotions. What that does in turn is that they start talking about their unpleasant emotions. What that then does, it helps them to forge better relationships with other people and they can talk about unpleasant emotions because they recognize it's a normal thing to do. And we now know in terms of research that people who talk about the emotions from a young age, they have better relationships, they do better in education, they have better careers, there's a better sense of well-being, self-esteem, and so forth. So, because I guess what happens, especially with unpleasant emotions, it has some release and it's not stored in the body. I might have mentioned it last time. If it's stored in the body, this causes problems. But if it's released, then in a sense, there's that headspace to have something more positive that they can kind of live with and grow with. So yeah, yeah.
So when you say release, how do you mean? How do they release it? Is it by talking, journaling? What sort of
whole range of things. So I can't. You know what? I've said this. I can't remember where I've said it. So if I repeat myself, please excuse me. Freudian quote: "Unexpressed emotions never die; they are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways." And another writer said that unexpressed emotions are small ticking time bombs. They are illnesses in incubation. Whoa. So basically, emotions, whether unpleasant or pleasant, are seeking expression. So if we're happy, it's quite easy to kind of do that, laughter, joy, and so forth. But if they're unpleasant, dependent on our culture or gender or family, what happens, we don't express them. So the emotions then are locked they stay within the body, but they really are always seeking healthy expression. So if we don't express them, a whole range of illnesses, including poor mental health, poor immune system, and so forth. To express them, though, if we can't talk about them, or the family that we're in can't talk about them, we find spaces where we can. What helps me to talk about emotions is I write, so I journal. I was on something earlier on today. There's a woman who dances. That's the way of expressing emotion. And people who are involved in the creative arts, very, very good. They use art or needlework or some form of craft work to express what they're feeling. So sometimes when I was working with young people, if they had difficulty expressing emotion, there's a few ways. If they're kind of creative, you ask them to bring in some artwork, and artwork which expresses what you're feeling, and the artwork is a way of engaging the conversation. For some young people who can't talk about their emotions, you ask them, what music are you listening to at the moment? What songs speak to you? So you ask them to bring it in, you listen to the words with them, and you engage in a conversation why this song is important. And the other way that I've used with young people, quite effectively really, okay, you can't express how you feel in words, but could you express it in a shape? What does it look like? What does it smell like? How is it shaped? And that is a way, what color is it? And has it got holes in it? So that's a way for them to describe how they're feeling. And then you can engage in a conversation with them. And then what happens is they start to become more fluent in talking about emotions. The shape changes, and then they're able to talk about emotions far more easily. So in a sense, it's a new language that hasn't been learned.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It is really interesting, because that was going to be one of my questions, whether you thought pure counselling would be the way to go. But clearly what you're saying is it has to be other things, that counselling on itself isn't going to cut it really. It's not going to produce that kind of transformation for somebody who's having mental health issues.
Well, I think for me, counselling is a conversation. Well, that's how I understand it. When I've taught it, it's a conversation. Sometimes it's a bit of a strange one because the person may not know much about you, but you use anything at your means to connect with people. So, for example, some people who struggle with anxiety or depression, there's some doctors, for example, who prescribe not medication, but they prescribe poetry. So poetry on prescription. They're very well read, and understanding their client, the patient, they may suggest certain poems for them to read. In the world of therapy, we have what we call bibliotherapy, whereby a therapist may recommend a book for a client to read, and the client then reads the book, and chapter by chapter, the issues or the scenarios are then used to help them work through their own issues. So there's loads of ways. I've certainly Journaling, I've encouraged students and clients to write, and then if you want to, you bring it in and they talk about it, and so that helps them to access things in kind of interesting ways, really. So yeah, counselling, it's not just simply talking, but there's other ways in which you can connect with people, or even pictures. Some people use photographs or pictures that helps people to access some unpleasant experiences.
Yeah. It is about that conversation, isn't it? We find with children, we've started using some coaching cards, and they just ask unusual questions, you know, and you just get like this one: what is the scariest thing you've ever done? It might not be why you were initially there with that child, but it's just getting them thinking about something else, and it's amazing what you can pick up.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
one of these cards says, you know, what would you do for your prime minister? Now that tells you loads about somebody in terms of where their mindset is and how they're thinking.
Absolutely.
When they talk about what and their values, if they talk to you about what they would do as a prime minister. And these coaching cards, the kids I coach now, sometimes they come in and before they say anything, they go, Miss, have you got the cards? I'm like, hang on a minute.
Yeah, of course. You have to find as many ways as possible to connect with people.
Yeah.
In a way that's kind of unobtrusive and so forth and so forth.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because with some of the clients that I have, I know a few of them, and it's really interesting what you mentioned actually in terms of GP prescribing poetry, and for me that's really important because that's part of what I know to be narrative medicine, which isn't just focusing on the condition, but seeing the person not just necessarily as a whole person, but taking in the wider aspect of that patient as well. And I think that's really important, and I think that's what will bring healing, because you're not just focusing on whatever it is that they're presented with. The other thing that I was thinking about as well, some of the clients that I've had said that they've been for counselling, and I guess it really depends on the counsellor,
of course,
and you know how they work with clients. But some, particularly from a trauma perspective, some were saying that every time, you know, it didn't help them because they were still, you know, 3 years later, they're still crying over a particular event every time they remember. So it's that whole neuroplasticity thing, isn't it? When you talk about something, you can't. Are we keeping them in that trauma when they're remembering? So it's just wondering really about how you deal with that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually, because it's not a technique that I'm aware of it, but I've not been trained in it. So one of the things that trauma specialists try to do, because trauma really is kind of located in the body, it's trapped in the body. So through a series of techniques, that it's an attempt to shift it from the body to the mind, so it's stored in the mind, and then it causes less problems really. So it's not something that I've been trained in, but it's something that I'm certainly reading about now, getting more familiar with it. Because actually, well, at one level, you've got the serious trauma where people's lives are threatened. But you could say now, and I think there's an agreement that over our lifetime, we experience traumas on many levels. But there are some traumas that really, it stops people from sleeping. But the other thing that's quite interesting, that quite often an adult's response to trauma is quite often linked to earlier responses to trauma that were never dealt with. And it's just kind of been manifested now in their kind of adult world, or, you know, kind of young person's world. So sometimes it's looking at what's happening now, but also what's happened in the past that hasn't been attended to.
I've heard it described as, you know, sort of distress to the nervous system for years, and that hasn't actually been processed.
That's absolutely.
It manifests in
No,
that's it's really interesting, because one of the things we find as well, and obviously I'm not a counsellor at Delroy, but we, you know, we're looking at things with children from quite a low level. So we do anxiety, but it's low level stuff. And it's trying to get in there quite early. But we definitely find that when we work with the parent, that makes things much, much easier. And when parents say to us, I want my child to be more resilient and be able to do stuff, and I'm saying, well, tell me how you react when something goes really wrong.
Absolutely.
I kick off and I cry and I shout. And what does your child do? Well, they kick off and they
absolutely.
learned behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I recall working with a student who came to the session with their parent, and the mother wanted to come to the session, and I said, I'd rather not. And when I look back now, I wasn't rude, but I just remembered session that I'd done 2 or 3 years previously with a mother who came in, and it was the biggest mistake I've made. It was, oh, it was. Anyway, so I just said to the mother, I said, look, 20 minutes and she'll be out. Anyway, this young woman, she'd had 3 attempts on her life. And as I kind of got this sense that there's nothing that she'd experienced that was bad, but why these attempts? So I said to her, I don't know what led to it. Anyway, but I remember the question. I said to her, when your mum and dad have an argument, and how's it resolved? She said, what, do you mean when they have an argument about us as children? I said, no, when they have an argument, what happens? She said, well, dad goes in the front room and mum goes in the conservatory. I said, well, how do they resolve it? She said, I bring them together.
Hello?
I said, you're a child. You should not be doing that for your parents. And I said to her, can you see that you've not learned how to resolve problems? And I said to her, could you see your mother being in this session with this coming to this conclusion? And we had a really, really good session, and she never came back, but I think she got what she wanted.
Yeah.
It was irresponsible of her parents, for her as a youngster, to be bringing them together to sort out the differences. And if she didn't do that, they just won't sort them out.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I just thought, well, I said to her, well, I said, if you're doing that, where have you learnt to resolve issues? She said, well, I haven't. I said, so hence the suicide is just a default position because you know no other way.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read loads of stuff over. You can imagine 30 years. You just think,
Oh yeah.
God.
You know, you talked about, because I watched your interview that was on LinkedIn, which was really interesting. And then you mentioned something about intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
I can't remember if you mentioned that already, but could you just explain? Did you mention it? I can't remember.
It's funny to say that because I sent it to my former manager from Sheffield Hallam, and she said, really good interview. She says, she said, a minor quibble. You didn't explain intergenerational trauma. So you're saying that. Yeah. So there's this idea for some time that trauma was passed through the generations. It was an idea, but it was certainly kind of debunked, so that you have a generation that's been traumatized and that's passed through the generations. So there's 3 areas now. The study of epigenetics has really kind of brought that to the fore. So basically, I'll say a little bit about epigenetics and then something else. So epigenetics, what they did a, I can't remember the time now, but they did a research. They sprayed either rose or almond fragrance with mice. And as they did it, they gave the mice very mild electric shocks.
Wow.
So every time they sprayed almond essence, mild electric shocks. And then what they did after a while, so then obviously the mice then would shake with the electric shock. What they then did, sprayed the essence, the mice shook even with the electric shock. So they did that a few times. Every time there was an almond scent, the mice shook. What they did, they then got those mice and bred them 3 generations on. And when those 3rd generations smelled almond fragrance, they shook.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah, shook. So this whole thing about intergenerational trauma is one. Rachel Yehuda is a psychiatrist in America. She's from the Jewish community, 2nd or 3rd generation. And she is interested in trauma, and they know how to test the blood, because there's various blood levels and so forth. So what she did, she took blood tests from, I think, 2nd or 3rd generation Holocaust survivors. So you had the great-grandparents, then the grandparents, and then their own parents. She took blood samples from them, and she took the blood samples from vets returning from the Vietnam War. And when they measured the blood levels, they were the same. So these guys had experienced trauma on the battlefield, and the other controlled group were 2 or 3 generations removed from the concentration camp, who never witnessed it, but the trauma had been passed on through the bloodline. And I think there's a strong there's a strong feeling now, thought that actually it's also passed on at a cellular level. So so for me, it's quite interesting. If we know now that people who meditate regularly, there's an impact on their blood levels. I suspect if we meditate long enough, there will be an impact right down to cellular level as well. So that's what intergenerational trauma is. It's trauma that's passed on through the generations, to the point whereby I've said for a long time that in terms of the trauma of our own past, certainly the Caribbean past, I think we behave in ways and we don't even know why we behave the way we do. Not until we kind of step back and kind of start analysing and looking at ourselves. So that's intergenerational trauma.
Yeah. I think, did you mention that in correlation to what we see with how some of our black boys are looked upon at schools, that, you know, they're always angry. So I've worked with the same black boys that got kicked out of class, and they're fine. I'm fine with them. We have a conversation. But to a teacher, they've been challenging or disrespectful, and the boys are going, but I've only just asked you a question and now you're sending me out. Why are you sending me out? Because you've done this. But I'm just asking you a question. Well, now you're being challenging. And they're not being challenging. They're just asking you a question. And it's like, why do you see that so differently to me?
Yeah, well, I think it's certainly how we understand culture. That's one. And you'll know that, well, you know, amongst the Caribbean people, you know, I guess Africans as well, that you hear them talking loud, you think they're arguing. So no, we're just talking.
Yeah, just talking.
But to an outsider, it might sound like an argument.
Yeah.
And then I think what happens, certainly with a lot of white teachers, I suspect, they have preconceived notions about black boys anyway. Yeah. And I just think that what happens as a black boy begins to express himself, all that kind of kicks in. So you have teachers then who are they then become very fearful and they react out of fear. I don't think they would admit it, but I suspect that's what happens. So then I think, well, one of the things, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala that's kind of gets us ready for fight and flight.
Yeah.
And I think if you're in a society or an environment where you're always on surveillance or people watching you, that amygdala is always switched on.
Yeah.
But it's only meant to get us out of trouble in a crisis. It's not meant to be switched on all the time. Yeah. And I just think that what happens for lots of us, we're in a heightened state. So if anything happens, we kind of kick off and people go, you know, what on earth are you going off like that for? Yeah. But the brain is switched on already, looking out for something. And one of the ways of shutting that part of the brain off, believe it or not, is regular deep breathing exercises. So it's because what that does, it slows you down and settles you.
Yeah.
Dampens down the nervous system, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the whole thing with the body. So I think any counsellor now, and I guess anybody, if you're dealing with human beings and problems, you have to take seriously the impact of the environment and the impacts, the influence in the environment and the impact on the total being, not just at emotional or psychological level.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because if somebody's in that height, we all know that if we're in that heightened state all the time, you know, in that fight and flight mode or whatever, then the body's making all the cortisol and the adrenaline and all of these chemicals that are not meant to be there long term. They're only there to get you out of trouble.
Absolutely correct.
There all the time, then it's also going to have some effect mentally on all your other organs. It's going to affect you physically as well.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So hence, my friend Professor Divine Chishura from York St John, you know, you talk about Caribbean men who at young age will have heart attacks.
Yeah.
And you know, healthy guys and they have heart attacks, and part of I think there is a strong thing, or certainly heading towards that. Actually, because we're such in a heightened state all along, the body never gets a chance to switch off.
Wow.
So I'm convinced to the day that the reason why what's the footballer that died young? Footballer from West Brom died last year or the year before.
Oh yeah, in Birmingham.
Birmingham. Yeah, I can't remember his name. His name was just gone. He'll come back to me. I'm convinced to this day that the level of racism he experienced, Cyril Regis, was it? No, not Cyril Regis, was it? No, not Cyril Regis, somebody else. His name escapes me. I'm convinced that can you imagine X amount of 1,000 people shouting racial stuff to you. And the effect of it doesn't stop when the referee blows his whistle. The kind of chemical effect, the endocrine system, is still operating long after the game has ended. And if you turn up to train on the Monday and you've got some team members who have similar views, at what point do you escape? Excuse me. What point do you escape it? You don't. So I'm convinced to this day, part of his early demise, I think he died at 59, was to do with the level of racism he experienced and no period of time to process it.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, Karen, have you got some comments?
We have got a question. So we've got May Hilton asking, she'd like to know about any trauma-based training you can recommend, Dr. Delroy? Dr. Delroy, I like calling you Dr. Delroy.
Yeah, it's got a ring to it, so they say. Yeah, to be honest, I'm looking at some of this stuff. I'm actually reading a lot, but I'm actually looking at something. I talked to my friends about doing training, and they said, well, you know, what do you need to do training for? You know, you've been doing it long enough. It's just actually, you know, reading. But basically what you would do, you kind of, if you've been experienced for a while, you might do a course, but then you read, what you do, you try things.
Yeah.
So what I've done over the years with I read and I kind of try, then you kind of reflect on it, and then whether it works or not. So I can't recommend any course at the moment. I'm looking for some myself. And when I mentioned it to a friend, he said, what, you want to do a course for? You know, so, but if you don't feel confident enough to just get your stuff from reading. So I would certainly say that a course either from a recommended college or university, or something that, from a recognized body, that's what you want to do, really. I just think, and it depends it depends, of course, if you want, depends. If you want to do something like a CPD, continual professional development, or if you want to do a diploma or a master's in it, well, then you have to go to a university then. So then, you know, you're kind of pretty safe then. But if it's just kind of CPD, I'm trying to think, if they're involved with Therapy Today, at the back of Therapy Today, which is a national journal for counsellors, they've always got lots of courses in there. Most of those courses, I would say, are reputable.
Okay. I think a good thing as well, also, because I've done that, I think every year they have summits, and they have people from, you know, sort of internationally, you know, who will give talks on, you know, on trauma, and so there's some really insightful stuff there. And sometimes they can point you to, but a lot of them tend to be abroad, don't they, the courses? So I don't know really what's happening here in the UK.
Yeah, and I think with online now, the world is open to you.
Yeah.
You know, so I remember talking to a friend of mine, he wants a counsellor, but now the world is open to him because of how he is and what he's been involved in. He said he's actually thinking of looking abroad. Maybe going to America to see somebody there, because he's been involved in gangs. Not that he's been a gang leader, but he's been working with gangs over the years. And there's other stuff kind of going on in life at the moment. So, you know, he's saying, well, maybe I can perhaps kind of look abroad now.
Yeah. I think it's such an...
Sorry.
No, I'm just going to say the whole thing around trauma and how it affects, I think it's huge. And I think
absolutely,
we really do have to understand how that impacts across the board, because I think that's the major thing for a lot of the things that we suffer, particularly, you know, as you said, our communities as well. And I think that's kind of like the linchpin that's kind of underlying pretty much those things.
I think the same friend who told me the situation that happened, I think maybe about 2 years ago now. There's the organisation he works with, they were working with somebody in Birmingham who they thought was going on kind of getting back on the track, and unbeknownst to them, he had a couple of guns in the house. And somebody tipped off the police, and when my friend got to the home, because he's well known with the police and the court system in Birmingham, he said he saw some size of policemen. He never knew policemen like that existed. Huge when they kind of into this house. 2 kids, one was 15, one was 6, absolutely traumatized. Dad was in handcuffs. And the mother, who was also getting quite hysterical, she said to my friend, the last time this happened, I was pregnant with my daughter. And straight away I said to my friend, that young girl was traumatized in the womb. She's
Wow.
traumatized at 6 or 7 years old. And when she then, when it starts manifesting as a teenager, nobody will make the links.
Yeah.
And what I do know from when I attended a workshop with team leader from CAMS in London, he said that 70% of children do not get the intervention or the treatment they need when they most need it. And it will just go on as normal. I guess the police are interested, the legal thing, you know, getting the bloke back into prison, all the rest of it. I suspect very little care will be offered towards the two children who would have witnessed that. And 6 or 7 years later on, when the young girl's in school and getting to teenage years, the body's starting to change and so forth, and she starts acting in a particular way, I suspect nobody will make the links from the police invasion in the home and the impact that would have had on her and the family, and also the fact that while she was in the womb, she was traumatized. Because what happens when a mother is traumatized in the womb, stressor hormones affect the embryo as the baby is growing. And then babies can, you know, they leave the womb, start growing, and they're just anxious, and they don't know why they're anxious. And not until you have an interesting conversation with them and their mothers about, you know, tell me, what was it like when, you know, I say to the students sometimes, not only students, but other people, you know, have you had a conversation with your mother? What was it like when she was pregnant with you? No. Have a conversation with her. And the stories are so telling.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm lots of evidence now about prenatal learning, what happens in the womb as an impact on the child as they developed and so forth.
Wow. So what do you do? Do you go out and give this speech to people? Because I've never heard of that before. Is it something what you do on a regular?
Well, I can if people ask me, but this is kind of work that I do with clients as they come to see me. So this is my view on anxiety and depression. There is a case for medication, so I'm not knocking medication at all. Certainly at the university, over the years, the doctors have been really switched on, and they'll say to a student, before I offer any medication, hop along to see a counsellor. So, but there's sometimes that anxiety just debilitates people so much that they need something just to calm them down. So there's a place for it. But what my understanding of anxiety and depression is, your body, your psyche, your mind is trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
Something is going on or has gone on in your life that you need to give it some attention. And this is symptomatic of what's taking place. So I just see it as a symptom of something trying to get your attention. And sometimes anxiety has its roots from the womb. So if you kind of get a sense that, you know, so you do a bit of a history of people, and if there's no sense that they've experienced traumatic events, and it doesn't have to be major, but over a period of time, one of the questions I asked, have you ever had a conversation with your mum about what it might be like, you know, what it was like when she was pregnant with you? And that just reveals quite a lot, really. And then sometimes they'll let something slip, like, you know, if I ask the question, what's the relationship like between mum and dad? It's horrible. It's volatile. Well, can you imagine what a volatile relationship is like for a child? It's frightening. You know, it's frightening. And then, so how did you cope? Spending a long time in my room on my own. And here's this. And when you were in your room for many hours, did you read a lot? Yes, I read a lot. What did you read? Always fantasy, science fiction, an escape from what they're experiencing. If I got money if I got a fiver every time a young person told me that, I'd be a wealthy man. So children find ways of escaping if home isn't safe.
Do you think, you know, I'm just thinking about, you know, the more I'm not negating any type of mental stress or illness, but, you know, like something like schizophrenia, for example, or bipolar, you know, would you say, you know, if we're talking about it from a sort of mind, body, spirit perspective, would you say that somebody who's experiencing that has kind of, on some level,
So your microphone's cutting out a little bit. Could you say that last bit?
Sorry. So, somebody who has, more serious mental health,
sure,
issue, like bipolar or schizophrenia or something like that, would you, and given everything else that we've just talked about, and the connections between, there's the psychological and the emotional, if somebody has that, could that be viewed as somebody stepping off the treadmill then, as it were, as in on some kind of subconscious level, they've kind of withdrew from the stresses into
yes, I think that's certainly one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it, which was surprising to me many years ago, there's another understanding of schizophrenia or psychosis as spiritual emergence. And I didn't know about this until I read a book called Up From the Ashes by a guy called Neil Barker, I think, who was a lecturer at Newcastle University. And there's a whole body of knowledge on spiritual emergence, how psychiatrists are understanding psychosis as another form of expression. Certainly from the 60s and 70s, there was a guy called Thomas Statz, and he was very clear that mental illness or mental breakdown psychosis was a reaction to life, that life was becoming unbearable for people, and it's a way of kind of just stepping out, kind of closing down. So I think there is some insight. Certainly, the last time I was at Leeds Beckett, one of the individuals spoke about a whole group of psychiatrists in the UK are beginning to question the validity of medication and serious mental illness. So, again, it won't get much public press at the moment. So I think your comments are correct. I've said for a long time that psychosis is a language that we don't understand. That's how I've interpreted it. Now, there's a place for them to be hospitalized and sectioned because there might be a danger to themselves and the family. All that has a place, but I'm not too sure, certainly for our own people, where quite often we're heavily dosed up more than average patient. I'm not too sure about the place for that. I think I would always say there's a place for medication. And if somebody comes to me and they say, well, the doctors prescribe antidepressants, should I take them or not? I can't tell you. The minute I say don't take them, you just get into a whole legal stuff. And certainly as a pastor, sometimes people think, you're a pastor and all the rest of it. Well, was, and you're not into tablets. Well, actually, you know what? If it's going to give you some relief, it might be good for you to take it. But I can't tell you don't take it. I've never said to anybody, don't take it, trust God and he'll see you through. Well, you know what? I ain't going there on that one. No, sorry. No, not going there on that one. No. So I think I've not done enough reading on it, but I think the whole thing around spiritual emergence, trying to understand what people are going through, but certainly I would certainly concur with, it's really an expression that life has become unbearable. And it's a form of closing down. But also you'll get gay people who haven't come out have psychotic episodes. And it's this whole thing of trying to suppress who they are, and something has to give. I've met quite a few gay people who have come out, but actually they came out after the psychosis because they were trying to normalize all these, the emotions that they were feeling, and something had to give.
Wow.
That's
so interesting. Oh my gosh, I'm like thinking of my questions, but wow. So with mental health, I know there's a good mental health and there's bad mental health. So how can we? Well, I think you've answered the question, but how can you stay focused with your good mental health? I know everybody's like different.
Yeah, for me, this is the holy trinity of good health: rest, exercise, and diet. There's a macho thing about living on 4 hours sleep. I could do that when I was 19. I can't do it now. No, you mash up. I look wrecked. And for a long time when I was traveling to Leeds, for 10 years I was going to bed very, very late. And I hated waking up feeling tired. Because I'm the type of person that when I come in, I need time to unwind. So that by the time I got in, it was 11 o'clock. Perhaps I weren't going to bed till maybe 1 o'clock. Perhaps didn't look at other ways of relaxing. So then you're up again at 6 o'clock to start listening to clients and stuff like that. So it was tough, which wasn't good for my body. So rest is really important. Sleep, getting the amount of sleep that the body needs. I don't know about anybody else. I don't like waking up feeling tired. I hate it. So then you don't function well during the day. You don't enjoy the day because you're tired. So rest is really important. Diet is really important. I always say this. I don't promote being a vegan or vegetarian, but balanced diet, yes. And I think what is evident now, that the more natural foods you eat, the better, as opposed to processed food. And this is very personal. I'm going to be very personal now. I've not trusted the food industry for years. I think they put stuff in the food which increases their profits, but perhaps doesn't do any good for our health. So I'll give you an example. I shan't name the supermarkets. I don't want to get done for being liable. But one time they used to sell 2 packs of ice cream for £5. And I remember one day going, because we used to have it at the house. I thought, let me just check these ingredients. Like a chemistry lesson. So I said, no, I'm not eating them. No more of this stuff. And the other thing, I will say this. Those of you that are listening and you buy almond milk, check how much almond is in it. 2%. And the popular brand Alpro is 3.2%. So where the rest of the percent and so forth? There's very little almonds in it.
Wow.
And almond milk is easy to make, as I've made it. It's easy to make.
Yeah.
So I just think, exercise, diet, rest, diet. It's my dad taught me something years ago, and I've tried to do it, not always, but I've tried to do it. Always leave the table feeling you could eat something else. And he told me that as a teenager, and he was really saying, don't bang up your system so much that you give it too much work to do. So always leave the table feeling that you can eat something else. Well, we know that goes out the window at Christmas time and other occasions. So diet is really important. And certainly if you do alcohol, less as possible. I'm not saying don't drink it, but don't use it as a way of coping.
Yeah.
And then the other way is exercise. Exercise is really important. That's kind of proven. I do stuff. I still cycle. I still run. I still do circuits. I still swim. But that might not be for you. But if you travel on the bus, you can maybe 3 or 4 stops away from home. You get off the bus and walk home. Or maybe twice a week you walk to work if it's, I don't know, a few miles. And you walk back. Just ways of kind of keeping the body moving. Yeah. So that's it's a kind of basic level. The other thing I'd say to people when I did some of this earlier, don't keep watching the news to see the update on COVID-19. That will depress you. Just watch it for updates and then look at something else, find something else to do. Yeah. At one time, I guess it's still the same, Open University had over 900 free courses.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity. Yeah. So it's an opportunity to learn something new whilst we were stuck at home and all the rest of it. And there's loads more. The final thing I'll say to manage our mental well-being. One of the reasons why there's a massive spike in people becoming unwell mentally was that we were focusing on stuff that we can't control. And quite often that's what happens with anxiety. We're focusing on things that we can't control. So one of the ways of managing all that is very, very simple. Get a sheet of paper, horizontal line through the middle. On the bottom half, write the stuff you can't control. So for example, it was a joke 2 weeks or last year. So I said things like Boris Johnson, Chris Whitty, Matt Hancock, who's now gone, Javid, whatever his name is now. So those are things you can't control. When everyone's going to be vaccinated in the UK, we don't know. So those are the things you can't control. On the top half of the paper, write the things that you can control. What time I go to bed, what time I get up, what time I have my lunch, how I speak to people, how I treat myself, those type of things. And when you've made your list, tear off the bottom half, screw it up, put it in the bin, and focus on the things that you've got some control over. That will reduce your levels of anxiety, reduces blood pressure, boosts your immune system, just gives you a better sense of what you can control, while there's lots of stuff, lots of things that's still very unpredictable. So that will help us keep tabs on our mental well-being.
No,
Simple exercises.
That's brilliant. Yeah, and I totally do that, because if I don't get enough sleep, I feel really groggy and rubbish, and you can't function. So no, brilliant advice there. Thank you so much for sharing that, Delroy.
Yeah, the more sophisticated amongst us use the word things like groggy and can't function. I use the word mash up. So that's
It's all right, Dr. Delroy. We knew that was a technical term, so we're all going to be using that from now on.
Yeah, that's some very sophisticated people amongst us. So they use groggy, can't function very well, and kind of a little bit off edge. And I just said mash up. So
we'll all be ringing the doctor tomorrow, going, "Doctor, something's not right," because I feel mash up on the mind. It's interesting as well, because I think some of it is about. This is certainly for me. Is about habits. It's watching our habits. We're getting to habits are so easy to get into and so hard to break. So when I worked corporately, this is no word of a lie, I got into a habit and I worked like crazy hours. As soon as I got in, before I even took my coat off, glass of red wine. Every night I got into a habit of every night. Obviously I don't do that now, I've not done it for a very long time. And it's not until you sit down and go, wait a minute, what is going on here? But then it is just breaking that habit, isn't it? So a new way becomes the habit.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't know if you remember the first lockdown, food sales went up by 31%, alcohol sales 35%.
Yeah.
People using alcohol to deal with the pressure of COVID-19 and lockdown. And when, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but when Boris Johnson announced the lockdown in January, now we kind of knew that it was heading. And I found myself going into the kitchen and I was looking for something sweet to eat. And I knew it was a direct response to what I'd heard. And I remember sharing it with a friend. So what I did in the end, I had a drink and I had a teaspoon of honey in it, but I didn't find any biscuits or cake. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who's very health conscious. And he said, funny you should say that. He said, the last year I've eaten more sweet things than ever. And it's a conscious thing because we know we're under a bit of stress. We're looking something for comfort. So the whole thing about habit, Karen, what we can do, we start eating sweet things, and we're developing bad habits. Because we're under tension, a bit of pressure, and we want something that tastes good, it's comforting, and we're eating a lot of sweet stuff.
Yeah. The only problem is I don't really need an excuse for that.
Sorry? Oh, right, okay, right.
No excuse for the sweet stuff. Good news, bad news, happy stuff.
Right,
chocolate.
Right, okay. Right, okay.
I had a really bad thought. Well, it wasn't really bad. When you were saying, that, first lockdown when sales went up. What was the other thing that went up? He said there was alcohol.
Your food sales went up by 31. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say toilet paper because we're all.
Well, yeah, that's true enough. Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting.
That went up as well.
Yeah, I never worked on out.
What also happened during COVID, when you talked about studying, I noticed that lots of courses got reduced drastically. So they were encouraging people to study. So like, is it Udemy, whatever it's called?
That's right, Udemy,
courses went down. Some went down to nothing. Some were a tenner. So they were really encouraging people to
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Study. Yeah. I still went to the chocolate and the alcohol.
Right.
Anyway, can I just say, just to put a thing on that, this is the impact of Leslie's show. So since her guest last week, I have stopped drinking alcohol.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
When I say stopped, I mean stopped.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. Good.
Well done.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a very quick question? I don't know if you mentioned this last time or if it might be too big a question, but one of the things when people take their lives, the people that are left, and I don't know a lot of people that this happened to, but I know one lady really, really well, and she knew her son, she thought really, really well, and the thing she's beating herself up now for, and he has passed 4 years ago, she's still looking for clues as to why he took his life. And she's like, how did I not see this coming? What's your view about that?
Sometimes you just don't. You don't. You don't see it coming at all, no matter how close you are. Because in fact, once they've made their mind up, that's pretty much it. And you can have dinner with them and you say, I'll see you next week, or see you tomorrow, I'll see you later on in the evening. That's it. So I think that now there are sometimes you can see the clues, sometimes, and sometimes you might not see the clue, but there's a gut reaction. But many times people don't see the clues at all. There's a friend of mine who was working with somebody who's took his own life, and he's absolutely devastated. And we've kind of worked it through that we think that what happens, he was seeing this guy weekly, but it was too much because he had, now he's not a counsellor, but he had a lot of other work on. And he said to the young man, can we see each other maybe every 2 or 3 weeks? Because when this guy had finished talking to him, it was that much, he just couldn't deal with it as well as the other stuff. And he thinks now what's happened is that he told the guy, can we meet every kind of 2 or 3 weeks? The guy then took that as a rejection and, you know, took his own life. So my friend now is really struggling with it. Not sleeping at night and so forth. So, but going back to your friend, sometimes there just isn't any clue.
It's hard, you know. I mean, she's
saying
she's still looking under the carpet. She's still looking in the settee. She's pulled the settee apart. She's looking everywhere for a note. There's something that just says, "Mum, this is why I did it," or "This is how I was feeling," and she just can't get past it.
I think if this I would certainly say that perhaps she needs some kind of intervention just to kind of help her to kind of move from that. But you know, one of the things in terms of if we're working with individuals, and so you know, as a counsellor, one of the first questions I ask in the first session when people have told me about some of their stresses, I'll say, any suicidal thoughts? It's on the table. So. Okay, how do you plan to do it?
Yeah.
When do you plan to do it? Where do you plan to do it? And if they're saying yes, although well, that's, you know, kind of, you need to take some action in terms of them getting help. but what's not helpful, if you suspect, you know, it's not helpful to say to somebody, you're planning on doing anything silly.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
What you need to ask is, are you planning on taking your life? That's another conversation completely. So what it does, there's a strong possibility people talk about it and can work through it. They won't. But if we, and it's not a question just for counsel, it's for, you know, for all of us. If you're with a friend and you suspect, you know, have the courage to say to them, are you planning to take your own life? Okay, if they say yes, how are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? So in a sense, what it does, it puts it on the table and you're letting them know you're not scared about talking about it. Yeah. But I think in terms of your friend, 4 years on, that's a tough one, you know, because I've got friends who either son's taken their own life, and I think they're kind of working through it now, but suicide is not like somebody dying of cancer.
No.
Yeah.
It's devastating, and not only that, the person taking their own life, but it's you know, what if, could I have done this, and the guilt, and so
it's a tough one. It is a tough one.
It is, and I'm kind of, you know, one of the things, of course, you can't always give nice, neat answers because it's just tough that way.
Nothing fits into a box, does it, at all?
No, it doesn't. No.
It's so true what you said. When we started working with children in schools, first of all, and a child has said to me, I'm thinking of taking my life, and I'd speak to their support team. They were quite, not casual about it, but they would say, just ask them, what are they planning to do? When are they going to do it, and how they're going to do it? And I'm like, I can't ask that question of a 10-year-old. And they went, if they want to kill themselves, we need to have this conversation. Some of them would go, I've planned it, this is what I'm going to do. I'm like, right. And others would go, no, miss, I'm just joking. And then we were like, come on, this isn't a conversation to talk about. But it does separate the I'm not really from the I've really thought this through.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, interesting one. But it was scary for us as coaches going in there.
Yeah, I remember when I said to folks, you ask people that question? I said, yeah, it's a question, because what you're doing, you put it on the table, you're letting them know this, you know, we're going to talk about this. So one of the things about a counsellor, my supervisor told me years ago, he said, you're paid to be nosy. So there's no questions that's
exactly
off the radar.
Yeah, we call it being curious, Dr. Delroy.
Right. You see, more sophistication again. You see,
Yeah, mash up, know them.
yeah, that's right. Yes.
You need a bit of training, you know,
Yeah,
a bit more diplomatic.
yeah, a bit kind of rough around the edges. Yeah, a bit rough around the edges. So, yeah. But
Have you got any more comments? Any more questions?
People are saying really interesting conversation. Jackie said that she agrees about this stuff around habits. And Chantel saying, yeah, really interesting conversation. So I think people are just engrossed and they're liking our straight talkers. I think they probably like the mashup, Delroy. So.
You see, the thing is, I think sometimes, you know, if you're deemed as an academic, certainly black people, you know, they see you as being kind of a bit stush. And I'm just me, you know, so you know, I can use the big words, but what's the point if you lose people?
No, because nobody really gets it anyway.
No.
We all know. When you said you feel mashup, we all knew.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My mum, when she's come to some of the conferences I've delivered papers, and my mum's 86 now, and she said, you know, I understand what you're saying. So for me, it's about reaching people, and why miss people out? You know, this is, for me, this is about preserving life, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, this is a conversation, but it's about preserving life, and actually, why use such kind of, you know, I'm not saying that feeling groggy and feeling and curious. I'm not saying that, you know, we shouldn't use those terms at all. Having a bit of fun there, but certainly, I just think it's about reaching people and connecting with people.
Definitely.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, Delroy. Thank you so much for.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Brilliant. So, yeah, before we go today, time goes so quickly, we have got some really, really sad news today. And Real Table Talk is losing Karen Cruz. Karen is going to be leaving us. Well, this is Karen's last appearance with the Real Table Talk. So, yeah, Karen, really sorry to see you go. And I know, Marcia, we're going to come over to you.
Oh, no.
What's the matter, Karen?
Well, should I be going now? If you need any counselling, I do mates rates.
Dr. Delroy, you best leave your number in the chat, you know, because I'm not sure what's going on right now.
Karen, we're really sad to see you go. We are. I mean, you've just been champion. You really have, and we are going to be sorry to see you go. But we have a little poem that we have commissioned for you.
Oh no!
I'd like to read that for you.
Okay.
Right? Okay, and it's called Karen.
Kind of obvious.
Karen, you are absolutely marvellous, full of life, with many jokes up your sleeves. Had us almost on our knees with laughter. It's ridiculous. With such uplifting energy and a lively spirit. That's one of the things that make you fabulous. You'll be missed by us. You go above and beyond to get things done. Highly motivated and valued member of the team, with a willingness to make a difference and help anyone, a passion for life and a love for people. Being around you is always fun. You will surely be missed around here, Con. Thank you for your fabulous and valuable contribution to Real Table Talk, managing questions and comments on the show. The timely feedback you shared weekly makes you rock. Thank you for being awesome and brightening up the room wherever you walk. We'll miss you, Karen. That's real talk.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Very good.
Oh, thank you.
We will let you have that as well. So, your own very special Karen poem. So
Yay! Oh no, that is really nice. Thank you. And the thing is, you know, Leslie quite rightly wants to take her business to another level, and you know, 100% behind her with that. And I've just got to be honest about the fact that I can't commit the time that Leslie needs to do that. So it'd be unfair of me, I think, to be just dipping out or not getting to sessions. So I've just been really honest and said I think it's probably time for me to kind of let Leslie Flourish, to use the name of my company. But honestly, it's been brilliant. We've had some real laughs, some fantastic guests, including the mashed up Delroy, Dr. Delroy in the house, people coming on that's making a difference to our lives and our viewers' lives. It's been great, and you two are just fab. So, and it's nice because I've just been on here and just been myself. I've not had to pretend to be anything else. So yeah, it's been good. I've really enjoyed it, and I've learnt a lot as well. That's the other thing. As I said, the last guest has actually changed my life in lots of ways. So yeah, it's been fab. It's been great. Well, thank you, and thank you for my poem.
Oh, you're welcome. And yeah, we're really sad to see you go. But
thank you.
I'm sure we're going to keep in touch anyway. So yeah. It's all good.
We'll still see, yeah.
You will. I might pop on every now and then just to say hello.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to come on and do some guest appearances and come on.
There you go, exactly.
Thank you. Just to go back, because I don't want it all to be about me. Chantal's just asking Dr. Delroy how they can access your services.
Right. Can I leave? If I put in the chat, they won't pick it up as well, will they? Or will they?
If you leave it with us, we can put it in the comments.
Okay, let me just. If I leave it, send it to you, Karen.
Okay, Chantal, we'll leave it in the comments for you a bit later on.
Definitely.
Cool.
So
thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. So next week Sunday, which is the 4th of July already.
Independence Day.
So we're not here next week Sunday, the 4th of July, but we are back on the 11th of July with a totally different stage. Should we say stage? Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that. So we will see you back here, 5 o'clock, Real Table Talk, 11th of July. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Well, good luck.
Yeah, take care of yourself.